and analysis. All right. So job order cost accounting systems and process cost accounting systems. They are the same in that they both track direct materials, direct labor, and overhead costs, and then account for those costs and distribute them across the materials or the products being produced. The differences in job order cost accounting, the costs are distributed across items that are completed at the end of the session, or at the end of the period, or when they're completed, but only completed items. Excuse me. With the process cost accounting system, the costs are distributed across the items, whether they're completed or not. So it's just at the end of the month, at the end of the quarter, at the end of the year, we assign all the costs to all the units that we've started and completed, not just the completed ones. We do this using equivalent units of production. Right? And so an equivalent unit of production is, you can bear with me here. Basically, it's a process that has the beginning and the ending inventory of partially processed units. So it doesn't matter whether they're completed or not. Anything that was worked on during that period gets some costs assigned to it. Best way to explain this is you have 1,000 units you start. At the end of the period, you've got 65% through making them. So they're not finished. They're just about 65% of the way. Right, so you would say you have 650 units of equivalent units of production. The theory behind that, the thinking is, if you start at 650 units and use the same amount of labor and the same amount of materials costs, essentially, you would have completed all 650 units. So that's the reasoning behind it. That's the best example we can give. I know that's a hard concept for some to follow, but try to think about it that way, and hopefully it'll help. All right, so it's a multi-step process for determining what the equivalent units of production are and then assigning costs to them. We're going to kind of walk through it real quick. Quick caveat, there is another method of process costing called the FIFO method of process costing. However, unless otherwise instructed in your test or on your homework, assume the weighted average method of process costing. So, switch over here. Try to switch over here. Come on. There it goes. Close this. And then let's zoom this in for you guys so y'all can see it a little better. All right. There you go. All right, so scoot this just a hair. There we go. All right, so here's the data we'll be working with. All right, so we are assuming that at the beginning of the period, we had 30,000 units in our process inventory. So that's our work in process account, right there. All right. Our percentage of completion was 100% of the materials had been put into the product. So they're already assigned, taken out of the warehouse, and set up on the line. But only 65% of the labor is done. So they're only 65% assembled, essentially. That's the way to think of that. Our materials cost $3,300, and our labor cost $600 so far. So we've paid our employees $600 so far to get 65% of the way through. And then factory overhead costs are assigned at 120% of direct labor, so it's $720. Right. So during April, during this period, we started making 90,000 units. And we completed 100,000 units. So we finished them, taken them out of work in process, and moved them to finished goods. Okay. Our direct materials cost was $9,900 for that period. And our direct labor cost was $5,700 for that period. Okay. Our factory overhead cost, again, 120% of direct labor, so $6,840. Our ending goods in process, we had $20,000 or 20,000 units, excuse me, left in our work in process account, right, of which 100% of the materials had been assigned to those units, and those units were 25% completed as far as labor, so assembling. So that's our information. All right. First step in this process, determine the physical flow of units. So beginning goods in process, 30,000 units, and we start at 90,000. So we have 120,000 units we've got to account for, right? Units completed and transferred to finished goods, 100,000. Units left at ending goods and inventory, 20,000. So that's 120,000 units to account for. They're accounted for in that way. So there's not some weird gap here that we've got to figure out what went wrong. That's a good start. Now we compute our equivalent units of production. So we're going to figure out if we had started with this number, we would have finished all of that process. So as far as equivalent units completed for the ones that were transferred out, well, that's 100%. So that's 100,000 units all the way across, materials, labor, and overhead. All right. But our ending goods in process, we had 20,000 units. Just in materials, we completed. So we have 20,000 units of equivalent units of materials, or product in materials. But labor, we only got 25% of the way through. So we could say 25% of 20,000, we really only got 5,000 units. You know, if we'd started 5,000, we'd have finished 5,000. Overhead, because it's based on what labor is, we assume the same weight as labor, 25%, 5,000 as well. So for direct material, we have 120,000 equivalent units of production. For direct labor, we have 105,000 equivalent units of production, and the same for factory overhead. So we're breaking this up based on what costs we're going to assign, materials costs, labor costs, and factory overhead costs, and determining how many units we have to assign those costs to. Now we can do the cost computation. So beginning goods in process, we had 3,300 direct materials costs. Right. Costs incurred during the period, 99,000. So our total costs were $13,200. For direct materials, our equivalent units of production was 120,000 units. So we will take those costs and allocate them across all 120,000 units to get 11 cents per unit. That's our cost per an equivalent unit of production. Direct labor, we had 600 to begin with. We incurred 5,700 for a total of 6,300. Our equivalent units of production, as far as direct labor was concerned, is only 105,000 units. So we would divide that up by that 105,000 to get 6 cents per an equivalent unit of production. And then you do the same process with factory overhead, beginning costs plus your incurred, and then divide that over your equivalent units of production to get your cost per an equivalent unit of production. Now, assign and reconcile. Cost of units completed and transferred out. Direct materials, $100,000 or 100,000 equivalent units of production times 11 cents per material cost, $11,000. Direct labor, units of production, cost per unit of production, there's your cost. Same thing with overhead to get cost of units completed this period, $24,200. Cost of ending goods and process inventory. Well, we had $20,000 or 20,000 units for the materials, 11 cents per material or per unit, equivalent unit. I'm tongue-tied today, excuse me. For $2,200 in materials cost that we'll assign to that. Our labor, 5,000 equivalent units of production at 6 cents per equivalent unit for $300 that we'll assign to our ending process and inventory. Our factory overhead, 5,000 equivalent unit, 7.2 cents for $360. Cost of ending goods and process inventory, $2,860 for total cost accounted for of $27,060. Now let's go back up here and bring that kind of full circle. All the way back up to the top. And you'll notice that if you add these all up, direct materials, direct labor, factory overhead, direct material, direct labor, factory overhead, they will equal the same number we just had, 26,000. That's what we're doing. We're taking all those costs and saying what goes with the total completed and what goes to our ending inventory, what's still left over. This much goes here, this much goes here. All right? Again, unless otherwise instructed, assume inventory costing uses the weighted average method for pricing inventory. Well, that was a quick overview of Chapter 16, Process Costing and Equivalent Units of Production. Again, I'm Paul Spence with Dennis Brooks from the Kalot Tutor Lab. If you have any questions or would like any help, feel free to email kalottutorlab@uab.edu, or you can schedule an appointment to Skype with them at Kalot Tutor Lab, I believe is the Skype name. I hope you all have a wonderful day or evening, and goodbye.